As Rachel said, I'm Carl Baden. I teach and soon will have taught at BC. And it's my really extreme pleasure to bring Jack here for a talk. Um, he's somebody who I've known for quite a while. I think that we probably first met when I was at Project Art Center in Cambridge, which would have been in the early 1980s. And I was running the photo area, and Jack was on the board. And I distinctly remember that there was at least one occasion where politics in the art world being what they are and were, I needed to go to him for some assistance, and um, he just really took care of business. Soon after that, I started seeing his photographs. I He has been, a not accurate necessarily label for Jack would be a concerned photographer, and he certainly has photographed populations that might warrant him that description. But he has also photographed um, motorcycle races. He's photographed his family. Uh, but I think probably what he's going to be talking about today are some of the more known projects that he's done, including uh, women in Framingham. Uh, Actually, I don't know the name, penitentiary.
MCI Framingham.
Okay, Massachusetts Correctional Institution. Thank you, Jack. In
Right.
Framingham, and notably the Orange. He was part of the Orange Line project, and I'm probably going to ask him a question or two about that during the question period if he doesn't cover everything there. But that was a group project of, I don't know, roughly a half a dozen photographers who photographed the Orange Line, particularly in Roxbury in the South End when it was coming, and Jamaica Plain when it was coming down, when the elevated portion was coming down. And Jack distinguished himself somewhat similarly to Walker Evans in the FSA by using an 8x10 view camera to make environmental portraits. And I remember seeing those pictures when they were made and thinking they were terrific. And recently they have had a second life, in part thanks to Gus and Arlette Kayafas at Gallery Kayafas. And they will be published in the fall in a book by Stanley Barker Publishers in England, which is one of the real respected and I guess hot photographic publishers. I would like to cut my introduction short a little bit and give the floor to Jack, because I'm sure that he's going to explain anything that I would say, but much better. So Jack, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you very much, Carl Baden. Great. Rachel Chamberlain, the McMullen Museum, and Boston College, and all family, friends, students, boys and girls, men and women, for being here. And thank you again, Carl and Rachel, for the privilege of this opportunity. It means a lot to me. So there. The first photograph is not made by me, but it's made by my father. It was recently discovered by my sister, but I think it was unwittingly prophetic. It shows my early engagement with photographs. I like the picture a lot, and I shan't show any more pictures of my childhood. My father was a very avid photographer. He had his own darkroom. he mixed all of his chemicals from compound, and he made the whole thing seem more mysterious than it really was, and it was enough to intimidate me to stay away from the medium until I was in my early 20s, and I got my first camera, a little point and shoot camera from a relative in Japan, and began making photographs of my family. I was at this point 22, 3, 4, somewhere in there. And my first engagement was with the equipment. I lusted for things like Nikon Fs. I spent my evenings poring over photography magazines, looking at the cameras. And then I built a darkroom, and that was the new fascination, was the darkroom. The idea of plunging a piece of plain white paper into a solution under romantic yellow light, and an image appears. Wonderful stuff. Still is, actually. And then I guess at age 30, the innocence and the pleasure ended with the realization that photographs could communicate serious things about serious stuff. And then I was hooked. At this point, I was immersed in an insurance industry career, and was very depressed about that. Thought I had made a mistake, wished I'd gone to art school. And then, but as luck would have it, as I became more serious in making my photographs, I came into contact with other people who were serious about making pictures, among them Dick Rogers and Todd Stewart, who invented me to come to Harvard to be the administrator of the photography department, which was a new department to Harvard, and it was running out of control. There was no control of the flow of equipment, materials, resources. It needed organization. So they invited me, and I went. And then that was 1970. And then the following year, 71, they invited me to participate in the teaching. And then to the new millennium, that's what I did. I was the administrator at Harvard. I was teaching in the department, and I was making photographs of projects of my own choosing. The first series of photographs I made were at a chronic disease hospital on Long Island in Boston Harbor. And these are the pictures. I was using at that time a 35 millimeter Leica camera, and with a 50 millimeter lens in this case. And I was photographing these people at the request of the social services director of the hospital, who wanted me to photograph improvements he was making in the facilities to increase the morale of the inpatients. So I made portraits much like this, and I didn't go to art school, and I always felt I lost something in that, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway, I learned to make photographs by making photographs, and I learned that surfaces like this rubber wheel and how they reflected light and how wonderful it was, and I learned to be able to predict that to some degree. I also became aware through photographs like this of the importance of not just the head, but also the hands in the complete expression of a portrait. This okay. Oh, this one. This is a photograph that came about serendipitously. I was photographing this man with a flash, a very direct flash. I knew nothing about flash at the time, and so the frontal light is from my flash, and then there's this backlight that I didn't count on that shows the top of his hair, the phrase of his hair. You see that? It makes the photograph just much more beautiful. And I was taken by the fact that he's on crutches. Here's a journal, and the two magazines he is reading, as I came across him, were Life and Look, and I thought that was a marvelous study in optimism. And this man is just on the brink of death. I made these photographs when I was late 30s, early 40s, late 30s, 38 maybe. I made them, and I showed them to an older faculty member who said, I could never make photographs like that. You can make photographs like that because you're so far from that point yourself. Well, now I'm not so far from that point. I must say the photographs are more difficult to look at now than they were then. This is what's around the corner. And then in 1974, I was teaching a section of a big course that was run by Alfred Guzzetti. And as we were breaking for Christmas, Alfred said, I have a great idea. When we return from Christmas break, why don't we have a faculty work in progress show? Well, I thought it not a good idea because I had no work in progress and I was in some sort of photographic slump. And so I thought, it's Christmas. What happens at Christmas? Well, the Salvation Army is very active at Christmas. So why don't I, for the next 2 weeks, photograph the Salvation Army? Get their permission, follow them around. And so I did. And as it so happens, by coincidence, they are now playing in the hospital that I had just been making photographs of chronic disease patients in some months earlier than that. I don't have much time to talk about these pictures, but each has a little something to go with it. When this occurred, I heard the band playing. I was in a room several doors down the hall. I heard them playing, and I walked up quickly. I turned the corner, and this is what I saw. And there was no time to look at the camera and figure out what it suggested to her. I just raised the camera, snapped the picture, and it turned out that the lighting situation and the distance was the same from where I came. So I made this picture. It was just like out of nowhere. And one like I comes to count on such good fortune. This is another, of course. I was using flash, photographing mostly at night. Was always interested in how the brass instruments would deal with the flash. Sometimes it would be blinding, sometimes it would be enriching, such as this. This is, excuse me. I took on and have maintained an interest in photographs that look like something other than what is going on. This is a minister of the Salvation Army at a Christmas evening service, looking for all the world like a Nazi World War II officer. Does he not? Because the SS and call it the severity of the look. It was just like it's just striking, I thought, and that's the story about that. And unfortunately, we have too little time here to talk about each project at the length I would prefer. This was in 1976, the bicentennial year. And I had the fortune at that time to be sharing an office with Bill Eggleston, who was an artist in residence as was Bill Burke at one time, actually. He was an artist in residence at Harvard for a year. And my office was a double office and usually when there was a visitor, they took over half my office. So we spent a lot of time together. And he knew I planned to make this cross-country trip photographing Americans viewing America during the bicentennial year. And he persuaded me to use color. So I did, which seemed like a good enough idea. But when I started using it, I realized that I'd added another problem to already too many. And the ones I was dealing with at that point were, say, form and content. Challenging enough. And then, add to that color, and it becomes the stakes get higher. And so, as is obvious in the early work, I was very conscious of the color. For example, bracketing this couple in blue with different shades of red, that sort of thing. And the way I would work is I was camping with my own family in a Volkswagen camper, and I would make it a point to pull in to wherever we were going to camp that night. About 2 hours early, 2 hours of light left or 3 hours of light left. And I would put my camera on a tripod. It was a 6x9 camera. I put it on a tripod. And when if I saw an interesting setting, I would ask permission to photograph them. It was almost always granted. And I made it a point to do like very little direction. I would tell people maybe where to stand and then hope that they did something interesting. And that was as far as I would take direction. There might have been exceptions, and I'll talk about them if they come up here. So this one I will not say anything about. This is Yellowstone National Park. I'll say that. Some have anecdotes that can't not be told. This is a family of four. I don't mean four people, I mean four families. This was some river in Washington. Name escapes me, but these four families would go every year in time for the salmon run, and they would catch enough salmon to last them the whole year. Then they would come back and they would catch more salmon. And the problem is you come upon a scene you're unknown and you want to take a picture, and how do you go about it? What do? You have to decide quickly because no one's going to wait forever. So I asked these folks if they would just like maybe form a semicircle behind the fireplace, and that turned out to be the right thing to do. And meanwhile, you see this kid in the back on the porch. He was running back and forth, and I timed the exposure so he was there. I mean, he's hardly significant in the picture. He wasn't worth the trouble, but I have that memory about it. Is this correct? Is this the next one? I think I might have skipped one. That's the first. Keep going back. Okay, that's in my next picture, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. This is just another couple who I thought were interesting. I thought their car was interesting. Their tent was interesting. And I told them, well, after they agreed to being photographed, why don't you stand there? And I looked, and it just looked okay, but not interesting. And this is much more direction than I ever imposed. But I wondered what it would look like to open the trunk and open the door. And I did, and it made the picture more interesting. There's a lot to be said about these photographs and their influence on my confidence as a photographer. I don't have time to relate that now, but remind me at the question period, and I'll come back and tell you how pivotal these photographs were in my development and confidence. And now we're moving all too quickly, but I don't know how else to do this. Now we're at MCI Framingham, where I worked for a very long time. This all began with an application to graduate school. I was, at this point, I'd been teaching for about 4 or 5 years, I think, and I was enjoying it. The teaching was appreciated, and I realized I did not have a degree that proved that I was doing that I could do what I was doing, basically. So I went to the ed school and told them my story and said I wanted to be admitted. I wanted a degree, and I wanted to earn it, and I wanted to earn it in the following way, and that was by designing photography teaching curricula for people that were institutions of confinement, like chronic disease hospital and like prisons, as a way of giving them some interesting way to spend their time, as a way of giving them an opportunity to make photographs of each other or whatever, and to use and to learn the analog processes of wet photography. The grad school accepted it, and then at that same time, simultaneously, the Massachusetts Prison Art Project was looking for someone to teach photography at MCI Framingham. So it just all worked out very well. Adding to it, my daughter Laura was at the time 18 or 19 years old, and she was interested in photography. And I felt it would help me as a man in this whole women's prison to have my daughter their age with me. And it did. And she was also of great practical value. We took over one floor of a wing that was abandoned, and we built 5 dark rooms from scratch. We got a lot of support from Polaroid, and the program took place. It was successful. I wrote a thesis about it, and I got the degree, and that was in 2 years. But at that point, I'd become so interested in the women as subject matter, and getting to know them as real people. I went on stayed there I was done with my degree in 78, and I didn't leave there till 85. I was addicted. Friends were telling me, you're spending too much time there. There are other things you can do. You're repeating yourself. And I was mostly deaf to them until finally in 85, I did get out. And it wasn't without some departure anxiety. It was a great project, and I really enjoyed winning these people's trust, having them relaxed enough in my presence to make photographs that I thought were authentic representations of who they were and what they thought. It was a very enjoyable project. It was also when I started to try to modify the harshness of flash by any number of means. My goal was to try to make flash look like window light. And so I put together this contraption that it's seated in the tripod socket at the bottom of the camera. And then it was a series of armatures that went out like this to end up in an umbrella, rather large umbrella, something like this, with a light pointing into it. And so I walked around with that. I had to be careful going sideways through doorways, not poking people in the eye, but it did produce the kind of light that I was looking for, as is seen here. I love this picture. I mean, her hands are, it's just like, once in a while, it just happens, you know? This is a prison cell, and it looks much more like a dorm room. And that's because of the governor of Massachusetts, Dukakis at the time, who went on to run for president, who wished to make the women prison cells look more like dormitory rooms, and they could appoint them in any way that they wish, within reasonable taste. They were also allowed to wear their street clothes within reason. And so it just does not look like a prison to me. I would not know it, and neither would you. And also, do you see the slats behind the curtain here? Can you see those? Yes, no, nod. Those are bars. But the Dukakis administration disguised the bars within slats that look like blinds rather than bars, but they're actually bars. You can't get through those. And that's an all too abbreviated version of that project. And this is hard to know the year, early 80s, I would say. And these are Cambodians in Lowell. And Lowell, the Library of Congress became interested in Lowell as having been the seat of the Industrial Revolution in this country. As which industry it lost first to the South, and then I think to Southeast Asia. And what happened as a consequence is that Lowell went into a long period, decades-long period of depression, and was just a ghost town, really, except for those who had nowhere else to go or couldn't go anywhere else. And then everything changed with the boom of the microchip industry in Massachusetts, which was located primarily on the Route 128 and 95 belt that circled Lowell. So suddenly those who couldn't find work could find work within commuting distance of Lowell. And those people who were working in these massive factories at all levels of management and first-line workers were looking for housing. So as a consequence of these things, Lowell became reborn. And at that time, the Library of Congress was interested in finding what was left or what could be found of its roots to the Industrial Revolution, the multiplicity of generations and of nationalities that came there. I should say, acknowledge to Henry Ornstein, the Library of Congress really wanted Henry to do this job, but he wasn't available and he recommended me. So thank you, Henry. So this is part of the Buddhist community. Around the same time, Lowell, Massachusetts was designated as a place of refuge for Cambodians who were escaping the horrors of the Khmer Rouge and looking for resettlement in various places in the United States, among them Lowell, Massachusetts. And to me, I was commissioned to photograph everything and anything, but I gravitated mostly to photographs of the Cambodians. I was very interested in them. I was familiar with and impressed by Bill Burke's work actually in Cambodia. And so I looked at his pictures, I looked at my pictures. We actually had a show together in which he was the principal at the Addison Gallery of American Art of these pictures and of Bill's pictures way back when. This is an exorcism, by the way, and these people are trying to be, the effort here is to exorcise them from the nightmare and the horrors of the past, of the life they lived in Cambodia, from which they escaped to America. So you can correct me historically on any of this later. These are again Cambodians, and this is a service, a memorial for the deceased. And it begins by the participants coming to this bowl in which there are incense sticks that they illuminate on these candles, and then they carry them into the church. And the organizational premise that I was attempting here was to have the way the incense flared out to like become reflected in the arrangement of the people behind the bowl. This is a Cambodian wedding. Again, with disguise flash, a smaller version. I couldn't walk through crowds with this big umbrella. And this is a Cambodian wedding. So in services like this, the Cambodians, they're always they're on their knees or crouched over. And so as a photographer, I could not conscionably walk through without causing a disturbance. So I did a lot of walking on my knees to get from one vantage point to another. And so I took up this position in front of these couple who were getting married and just sort of waited for something to happen. Photographers will know that in more fortunate times, you develop a sense that something's about to happen. You don't know what, and you're often wrong, but sometimes you're right. And in this case, what did happen is the maid of honor here is reaching forward to like block the tears that are coming down the bride's face, and that was the moment. This is another Cambodian photograph, and I looked at this scene. I was in the room standing. I looked at the scene, and it just seemed like to me like it seemed stark and austere. It seemed like an interrogation, and it reminded me of what these folks went through, very possibly in getting here, going through border crossings, having their papers examined, etc. Interrogation after interrogation, and hoping they'd get admitted or allowed to cross. So I saw this, and I grabbed a chair down in the corner. I put the chair over here and stood up above and looked down and just wait for the right configuration of people of whatever that is, and made the photograph. And what in fact is going on in this picture is something much less threatening or provocative. One man is showing his family pictures to another. Has nothing to do with legality or papers or passports or borders. These are French Catholics in Saint Jean d'Arc in Lowell. And there were a lot of French Canadians who had come to Lowell to work in the mills at the turn of the century, and their families remained. And here are some of them. And this is the baptism of a baby, obviously, and the sister looking on like she thinks her brother's going to be drowned. And the photograph has more drama in the instant than intended. And what happened is, as I released the shutter broke. It hung up, and what was supposed to be a 15th of a second became something like a full second. These are Portuguese who also had their origins in ancestry that came over to work in mills. And this is a religious celebration. It's the night before All Souls Day, which I guess is Halloween. And so they were promenading through the town of Lowell with Mary being held in a crib, and these kids holding a gigantic set of rosary beads. And it was another one of those situations where you feel like there's a photograph around here somewhere. So you move around and it became, in this case, it became this. All right, now we're in the 90s, 80s early now. And I photographed because I've been involved with motorcycles all my life at one level or another, from the desire to own one at age 9 to then owning them as a teenager, building them, rebuilding them, racing with them, being involved with them always at some level. And during these times, I was obliquely aware of the idea of children races, but I never undertook to really look at it. On the surface, it seemed alarming to me that parents would encourage and allow their kids to be involved in such a dangerous sport. So I decided to photograph and see if I could get a better handle on it. And it turned out to be much like Little League, where much of, if I'm not doing them a disservice, I hope, most of the parents' ego invested in the performance of the kid. So these fathers, I mean, this guy just really wants this kid to win the race, probably more than the kid himself does. And I was interested in that phenomenon, that the parents would so willingly invest themselves, their kids, put their kids at this sort of risk, was remarkable to me. And I never saw a fatality, but I saw plenty of injuries, and there's always an ambulance there, and it got used. So it's more dangerous than Little League. There's another picture this is a good one. I like this. This seems to me to be much more the parents against the parents than the kids against the kids. I like the dark one. The face of the storm clouds above, it's just all seemed to quite work. Probably works more in here than here. But anyway, it's been a while since I've looked at these. That the next one. No, I rarely in my photography, I really target anybody. But I was after this guy. His T-shirt says, "We lay anything, Gilbert and crew." So I thought that was a little offensive. Not that I'm that fragile about these things, but his kids racing and evidence of the dangers is made obvious by the presence of the ambulance. I like the way the woman was standing in the ambulance door, and the kid, although he appears to be what he might well have been doing, is scratching his head, questioning the sanity of all this stuff. I think this is the last one of that series. And this kid, who looks hardly old enough to form complete sentences, can ride the wheels off a motorcycle. Like they were mostly like 125cc bikes, and which can be fast. But on this night, he has won 1, 2, 3, 4 trophies. I think I'm talking too much. We're not going to get through this. This is a mother tuner of a motorcycle, and that little girl, she's not actually racing the motorcycle, although I like the illusion of that. She's got her brother's helmet off. He's off somewhere else, but the mother tuned the bike. This was in the Aperture mother and daughter show. Bragging rights. How are we doing on time? Nobody can hear me. Can they not hear me?
We can.
Keep going,
We're
Jack.
currently at 6:07, so it's fine. You can keep going.
Keep going. All right, because there is a bit of a distance here to go, and I could step it up. Maybe I will. This is the middle 80s, and I'm in Tijuana photographing people who live in and off the dumps in Tijuana. They pick all day in the dump. Am I repeating myself, or is this just from having said it before? They are in there. They look for aluminum cans. They look for the copper wiring that's in transformers. They look for paper. They look for cardboard. And every night, a junk dealer with a truck or two comes to the side of the dump, and they cash out whatever they've been able to pick during the day. They also keep things for themselves. Doors out of which to construct their houses, toys for their children, and food that is made to turn cosmetically, but is still edible. And all ages work. This woman is, what is it? Is she in her 60s or 70s? but she spent the day picking in the dump, and she's exhausted, and her daughter is reaching over to embrace her head in the back seat. I'm just going to run through these without talking about them unless there's something that must be said. Oops, sorry. Okay. I think this is the last in that series. This is the mortality rate is high, and it often strikes the young because of obvious reasons: nutrition, health, irrigation. This is a grave. These are the children, the mother's grave. These are her children, and this is her father. They're her husband rather, and they're burning flowers that are making the turn to turn them to ashes, and then they'll replace them with fresh flowers. It's a pretty moving thing. This came after the Orange Line, and this is a series of photographs that are made at the corner spa right here, 2 blocks from 2 houses from where I live. And it was a kind of a dive of a corner store. It was run by a guy named Joe, who pretty unkempt, but one of the most lovable guys in the neighborhood. And people, this is sort of a meeting place for the neighborhood. Working class people came here. They caught up on each other's lives. They drank coffee, they read papers, they hung out. I took pictures there. And David Updike, son of John, is a friend of mine. He lives also 2 houses away. And he wrote about it. And I took these pictures, and we're going to do something with that at some point. But we both had the sense, because of the increasing gentrification of this neighborhood, that stores like this were short-lived, that they would soon be replaced with what, in fact, the store has now been replaced with, which is a very high-end, fancy, homemade pastry, chocolate, exotic coffee cafe. Did we miss the beginning picture of here? Did I show you this? Did we see it? No. This is Joe. And this is the shop he ran, the store he ran, and it was like that. And it felt like home to me and many of my neighbors. So we were there. These are just pictures I took. I went there all the time. I took a camera with me. Sometimes that's not 35, that's 6x7. It was a heavy camera, but not a great distance to carry it, 2 houses. And finally, the Orange Line. The Orange Line was the brainstorm of Linda Schwartz, who was a photographer. I don't know if she is any longer, but she organized this project. She had a sense that things were going to change. And she arranged for funding to do the project through Urban Arts. And Urban Arts put out a call for entries, or for candidates to put their work before a jury for selection. And four of us were selected, I among them, Linda Schwartz, of course. The others were Melissa Shook, who is no longer with us, David Akiba, who is no longer with us, and Lou Jones, who is still with us. And so I show one photograph of theirs each. They probably would be grateful for more, but this is all I have time for. This one is by Linda Schwartz, which is quite descriptive of the overhead railway. It's quite a fine picture. And that's me, but I'm not ready for me yet. All right, so that's Lou Jones. And I think that somehow that I missed Melissa Shook should be in here somewhere. There's Melissa Shook. Mighty fine picture of Dover Station. Light's beautiful, just marvelous picture. And then enter Jack. And this is the camera that I used. And this was made, photograph was made, I think, by a Boston Globe photographer. They got wind of the project and wanted to photograph something of it in progress. So this is the camera I used. That's the hat I wore. And this is some of the early publicity. So, did I explain why I was using this camera? I was using this camera not only for the quality of an 8x10 negative, that's 80 square inches of area. And I used it for that reason, but my primary reason for using it is I didn't want to appear to be a middle-aged white guy and primarily in communities of color. So I wanted to declare my presence and let it be known that I wasn't about to like sneak pictures that you didn't want me to take, etc. Of necessity, it being a view camera, all of the photographs are collaborations. In this photograph, I was interested in these two fellows standing in front of this tea station. And I noticed off to the right, this apprehensive woman looking on, and decided by a simple swing of the camera to the right to include her in the picture, to improve the picture, actually. So all of these are essentially the same process. It would often begin by someone asking me what I was doing with such a big camera, why I was there, and I would explain that I was working on this project to document the orange line. And generally it could be counted on that someone who inquired, asked you why you were there, what you were doing, would also consent to being photographed. And that was sort of the pattern that was followed. And if I saw somebody that I wanted to photograph, I would try to like work around them or arouse their curiosity. If I got no response, I would ask them. They would say why. They usually said yes. I got to know very few of them at a personal level, but this is Mrs. Ball, and I did get to know her. She was actually sitting in traffic, and I had my camera on my shoulder, which is how I carried it around, mounted on the tripod, just ready to go. And I asked her if I could make her a photograph. She said, certainly. I said, well, you're going to have to pull over. And she did. And I made this picture of her. We got into conversation. And as was my practice, I always brought people back pictures about them. I brought them back RC contact prints, the next week or something. I tell them, well, I'll be around. I'll have your pictures. And I did. And she did come around, and I had a picture, and I gave it to her. I got to talking to her and asked her if I could maybe come. She told me a little bit about her life, that she'd had several foster children that had matured to full adoption. And so I said, would you mind if I came by and took some pictures? No, come ahead. And so I did. And it's maybe one of the 2 or 3 houses that I did gain entrance into. There she is, sitting on her bed, also made with the 8x10 view camera. These are artificially illuminated by my new method of using flash, which was to take a really large studio flash, like 1,000-watt second flash. And when photographing in a situation like this, I simply aimed all the flashes at the opposite wall. So the opposite wall became the light source for everything in the room. And it worked out well, or well enough. It was a lot of luggage, but I was only carrying it into one apartment at a time. And then there's, I think, a certain kind of pressure that photographers will be familiar with, that you arrived in this situation, you've been given permission to take pictures, and then what do you do? Where do you take the picture? You look around the apartments like very quickly because everyone's watching you, like the most expressive place to place the person. And in this case, it turned out to be her bedroom, surrounded by the Pope, by John Kennedy. I'm not saying John Kennedy was the Pope. Suffer little biblical saying, here's the Pope here. And here she is pictured as a practical nurse in earlier years. And here is a flocked painting of not her sister, not her daughter, but her granddaughter. So that's that picture. And then we went on from there. These are two of the children that she took on as foster children that matured to full adoption. And I think there was a picture between those two. There it is. There she is again in now her daughter's bedroom, and holding in her lap. Sorry, it's not lighter back here. Holding in her lap is a photograph of in her 20s as a practical nurse and her son. I have a couple. Here's another one of her daughter and her son in the kitchen. And
I think you went backwards, Jack.
say what, please? Say that again, Carl. What did Carl say?
No, I'm sorry,
What?
maybe you're right. Were there two pictures in the kitchen?
No.
The same
Well,
one as before? Okay. So
sorry,
you
yeah.
just went backwards. Sorry.
Well, I hope it was worth looking at twice.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here we are back on the street, and I was just taken, but this guy looks a little bit like just a wonderful figure to me. The photograph in some ways reminds me, for those of you who remember it, August Sander has a camera magazine cover of two boxers. You know that picture? These guys are boxers, but their relationship seems the same, and their facial expression and attitude to me was reminiscent of that photograph by Sander, who is one of my heroes and hero of many others for good reason. And here, this is the photograph that for me became emblematic of the project. Did I skip one? God damn. Okay, let me try to do this. I want to go from there to there. Okay. This is one of the few photographs I have that is not a portrait of people. It's but I was taken by a lot of things here. Let me swallow water. The quality of the backlight coming through here. It freshly rained, and so the pavement is made more beautiful, obviously by the moisture and the wetness. And then it's a good illustration of the overhead railway that's no longer there. And then there's my van, and I was taken by the rectangle of my van, the lower right-hand corner, and then the rectangle of the sign in the upper left-hand corner, that whose proclamation speaks somewhat of or largely of the danger. It says recovered safe and sound, which is ominous. And as Lee just pointed out to me, Lee Wormald, it also shows the proximity of the overhead railway to the apartment. I mean, here it is, and these are bedrooms over here. So, no wonder it was an obnoxious presence for that, among many other reasons. It was loud. It was louder than a contemporary overhead railway would be, because it was old and its construction was coming apart at the rivets. So that's that. This is another slightly disingenuous moment in which the boyfriend has no idea that he's in the photograph that I'm making of his girlfriend. Similar to the woman who was standing to the right of the T station with the two guys. It's unfortunate that you can't see these actually as prints because the monochrome neutralizes them all. And but the quality, the surface quality of an 8x10 print is just marvelous. The textures, the tone, just more real than reality in some cases, or so it seems. Just gorgeous stuff. It now costs how much a sheet? What's a sheet of 8x10 film? $5 a sheet. I think it was $1 a sheet then or less, but I wasn't paid for it. These are two very interesting guys, four very interesting guys who there was a soundtrack that we don't have time to play, but I came across them in the street and they asked me what I was doing and what did I want and did I want to hear a song, and they went into an immediate rap song that described the neighborhood. This is outside a clinic. Is that for me or for the audience? Oh, me? Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. So this is outside a clinic, and this woman was coming out of the clinic. She consented to be photographed. And I was under the dark cloth looking at the ground glass, and I saw that this lovely infant, and she had her hand right over her face. I don't know her gender, his hand, right where the mother had the Band-Aid. And little things like that fascinate me, not always, but sometimes. This man, it was at the end of the day, the sun was getting low, I was running out of light. So I was on my way to my van, which was a few blocks away. Camera on shoulder, walking towards my van, and around the corner comes this guy. And I said to him, wow, I said, you look great. You must work out a lot. Because he did look out, and he looked approachable. And it turned out he was. He was, immediately friendly and conversational. And he told me that, he had been working out. He'd been working out every day for 2 hours for 2 years to kick drugs. And it was, so far it was working well, and he was sure it would be. So he agreed to be photographed. And I figured, the light is just, what am I going to do here? If I turn him sideways to the light, it's going to be horrible shadows. If I turn him facing the light, it's going to look like a direct flash. So I decided to put the sun behind him. So he's standing here and the sun is right behind his chest. And as a consequence of that, his muscles are given, definition by being outlined by backlighting. This photograph was 35 years in the waiting. It was in a film holder that I knew contained photographs from the Orange Line, but it went undeveloped because I had no reason to develop it. Really, I didn't think, and it was there, and I was on to other things. But it was in response to Stanley Barker's interest in publishing this book that I decided, well, I might as well find out what's on these negatives, if that's possible, if a latent image will last 35 years. And so, a friend and colleague and helper, Michael Fleur, mixed up a concoction of diafine and developed it. And lo and behold, there was something there. I mean, not a lot, but there was something there. And what was there, he was able to bring to a better level of realization through Photoshop. So there it is. 35 years in the waiting. How old is he there? Is he 19? Is he 18? Is he 20? So now he's in his 50s. I thought this photograph was, in a way, it was like representative, it was emblematic. It was like, food stamps and who uses food stamps. And it's the aggression of like all the light and the shadows, just sort of like targeting that and rushing at it. Words fail me to describe it, but those sorts of things are what were going through my head in looking in this photograph and causing me to make the photograph. can't remember exactly how I met these three people, but I somehow I was invited into their house, and they were an odd trio indeed. This is the wife, this is the husband, and this is the mother of one and the mother-in-law of the other. And they just seemed like they were a very mutually supportive, tight trio of people that fascinated me. I photographed them a lot. I don't feel like I ever got them. I think this might be as close as I got. But it's wonderful to feel that kind of excitement when you're making photographs, which is probably the reason, one of the big reasons for making them. The idea of just something's going to happen that's going to boost your adrenaline and your interest and your concentration, and you just like you want to get it right, whatever it is. And here's another picture of them. I also love this picture. This is them. This is the man. This is his wife. This is their dog, and this is their front yard. This slab of repaired concrete is their front yard, the street, and the empty chair. And my assumption about the empty chair is that it's for the mother or mother-in-law who's to occupy it or has left it, but can't say what, but there's something to that one. In a larger print, these onlookers are more obvious than they are in the photograph. In several situations, I was making a photograph of the scene, and there were people in the window that I would think would move away from the window, but just stayed there and added something to the photograph. There's one of a pizza shop. I think I've gone by it, and it's a similar situation. But the two figures may be too small to have been seen. I think that's the end. Is that the end, Lee? No, it's not. It goes on. Whoops. Here we go. Boom. And I think that's it. Is that it? That's it? Okay. Well, that was a rather graceless ending, but thank you for watching.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Jack.
Jack.
Sorry, go ahead, Carl.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jack. That was great. It was really nice seeing the pictures. I'm looking forward to seeing the book.
As am I. Yeah. I'm grateful that they're being published. And this work was shown by our Atlantic Gallery office, I think maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I'm grateful to her for that. And she also showed the prison pictures a while back, and also some of the Lowell pictures, most of the Cambodians. And I'm indebted to Gus for having introduced me to Stanley Barker and making this, getting the wheels rolling on this. I'm in debt to many people, too many to mention. Lee Wormald, Michael LaFleur, Bill Burke, Carl Vaden, Arlette, etc. We stand on others' shoulders very much, it seems.
So I have a few questions, but I think we're going to do this as sort of an open format at this point. So if anybody wants to precede me with a question, please do, and just unmute yourself and ask it. Otherwise, I will go myself. Going once. Okay. So, Jack, I have, like I said, a couple of questions. I wanted to go back for a second to the color bicentennial photographs, which actually I had never seen before.
Oh, yeah, those.
And you would, the reason I'm going back to them is because you had mentioned at the time to ask you later why this was an emblematic project.
Thank you. I had forgotten I said that, and I'm glad you brought it up. And how do I get back to these pictures? Yeah, can you get back? We're gonna try to get back to them.
Pictures.
We have what?
I don't have headphones.
Oh.
What pictures?
Say what?
What pictures?
Oh, the cross-country camping.
Just before the MCI Framingham. Yep.
Okay,
Right
is that
there.
the first one?
I think so.
Yep.
No, no.
All right, that's the first one. Okay, yeah, okay. Can you hear me, Carl?
Yep.
Okay, so this is not a cross-country camping picture, but this is a photograph on the Canadian side of the Niagara Falls. There's a large floral clock, and I walked up and looked at it. There was something magical. I was sure there was a picture there. And so I raised my camera to horizontal position. Whatever was there disappeared. Vertical, no better. So, well, I guess there isn't a picture here. And I turned around, and here's a guy who did think there was a picture there. And I just love that picture. He just like the crowd, just everything about it. The camera, the legs. It was just wow, just bang. But so to go through here's what the magic of these pictures for me resides not just in the photographs themselves, but this is 1976. So I'd now been at Harvard for 6 years, teaching for 5 of those 6. And it was all going well enough, but I was sure that these my colleagues, my peers, my superiors, all had an art education, and I did not. And I was convinced that there was a private body of knowledge that they had to which I did not have access. And I wondered what it was. It was a source of great and enduring insecurity that they had access to the private body of knowledge that I did not. And I was just like getting it right once in a while and not knowing why. So this was the first body of work since I began there that I had enough confidence in to show to people to whom I had access through, you could say, undeserved privilege, but I did. And they were Todd Papageorge, they were Ben Lifson, they were John Tarkovsky, they were Alfred Gazzetti, and these guys knew their stuff. And so I showed my pictures to them. And what happened was all of them uniformly liked the pictures, but some of them had favorites that someone, for example, Todd Papageorge had a favorite that John Tarkovsky would discount entirely from the pile. Didn't think it belonged in the portfolio. And that happened 3 or 4 times. And that was just absolutely literal. It was liberating. I mean, because then I realized that so much of this is subjective. And it is informed subjectivity, but it is subjective. And it's the process of like looking at lots of pictures, making lots of pictures, but there was no secret. And if there was a secret, I was beginning to catch on to what it was. I just had renewed confidence in my own taste about what I was doing.
So that's interesting because I know that you were a dedicated teacher. And I've thought of that in terms of my own teaching when I have to talk to the students who are used to taking classes where the class will consist of 10 quizzes, and then the teacher will average the grades from those quizzes, and that'll be their final grade. And so, I talk about the subjectivity and sort of how to handle that. I'd probably say different things if I was at a different school than BC, but did that strike you also as a teacher? That John Sarkowski would pick something completely different than Todd
Todd
Papageorge.
Papager.
And I would just interject for those who don't know, we're talking about a previous generation of luminaries. Todd Papageorge is still alive. John Sarkowski was the legendary head of the photography department at MoMA from 1962 into the early 1990s. Todd Papageorge was at Yale. These were all people, mostly men, I guess, who.
No, pardon me. I should include Susan Kazmarek was also among those.
Right, was
Yeah,
at
right.
MoMA. Yep.
Right. But she was also one of one of those who looked at the portfolio and whose opinions, largely agreed, but in some cases substantially disagreed.
So how about teaching? And the idea of how you talk to students about
Well,
the fact that you might ignore a photograph that they could theoretically take to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and have it hung on a banner out front.
right.
Wouldn't you feel terrible?
No, probably not. I'm happy to be wrong about that. But as a matter of fact, in support of that point, I do show almost every class these pictures to make that point about how how arbitrary it can be. It could simultaneously consistent and contradictory. It was liberating. And what I would tell students about criticism is their instinct, as as early students, is to leap to agree or to disagree adamantly and become exhilarated or depressed. And so I tell them that remember the Cosmic Muffin on WBUR.
Mhm.
He gave an astrology reading every day, and he said he would end and he would say, "It is a wise person who is guided by the stars. It is a fool who is ruled by them." And I told them they should regard criticism the same way, that they should let criticism rest on their head. If it takes, it belongs. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I'd like to remind people they can either shout out, or if you're too shy, you can type something into the chat.
Great.
So I'm going to move along here in my interlocution, and I wanted to move to the Framingham pictures, which are very they're quite intimate in a way, I would say, and they're very different from photographs of the like that that I've seen, with the possible exception of Danny Lyon's prison photographs, but for different reasons. And
Conversations with the Dead.
Conversations with the Dead, yeah. And I was wondering, looking at them now, there's always context. And when you showed them, or I know that they were in at least one issue of Aperture magazine, were the people's, were the, I guess I'm not allowed to say sitter, subject, so I'll say sitter, were the sitters,
I thought you said sinners.
Sinner?
Okay,
No, that's another question. That's another question.
Go ahead.
How important were the sitters' stories to you, and would they be something that would potentially be in some sort of a presentation? Did you take notes? Did you tape? Sort of like Susan Meiselas did with the Carnival Strippers. She made tapes also. Because I look at those pictures, and one of the things I think is, how did they end up in there? What's going on?
Is that a question to me?
Yes, it is.
I think it was like 3 questions.
Well, it's about which, did you, if you were to present them, either and I can't remember back when they were presented, or if you were to present them today, how would you feel about the context, about, their
Uh,
stories?
well, okay, so this is going to be a long answer. Bruce Davidson looked at those photographs while they were being made. And he said, I think these should be a book. And I said, well, I'm not a writer. And it gave rise to, it would be a book where the text came from. And he said it could come from the prisoners themselves. And so at that point, I began taking a tape recorder in with me. And I was well known then. And you spoke of the familiarity of the photographs. I mean, that I would say is no question, that's a consequence of the frequency and the duration. The frequency with which I went there and the duration over which I did go there was like, it was like 5 or so years. And I was, as someone said, I became sort of the school photographer of the prison. I was accepted and welcome anywhere. So and I developed friendships of some depth and etc. So we knew each other. So I began recording oral histories at David's suggestion. And I must say that when I did, I just told people I have a recorder. If you have anything you would like to say to me or to the world, please, let me know, and we'll go up to my office and we'll do it. And many did, and a whole different side of them was revealed to me, something I just didn't know. The candor was amazing, and it never did become a book. It might be someday, but did I connect them to the pictures? Yes. And usually when I show that work, I don't talk about it. I let the pictures go, one every 8 seconds or something, to the backdrop of the sound of their reciting, not me reading, them reciting their oral histories as I recorded them. And so they were, I would guess that you would have been at one of those presentations, but maybe not. And I introduced the whole thing as saying that what you're going to hear does not specifically relate to the person you're seeing, but it's two kinds of information about the same people in the same place. And it works very well together, I think. Does that answer? Is that an answer?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I'm gonna move on because I wanted to, I mean, if I have like I say, a few questions. So this is, I remember in the height of the pandemic in 2020, I ran into you in Harvard Square with a mask and your beard sticking out of the mask, and it was a cold day, and a Leica with a lens that you had preset the focus.
Right.
And I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think recently you told me that you were thinking of going, or that you were planning on going into Central Square with the 8x10. So in June, you will be 87. And as far as I'm concerned, you're a role model of longevity and cogency in longevity. And so I'm just curious, do you still plan to take your 8x10 to onto Mass Ave in Central Square, or what do you?
Yeah, I would like to flatter myself by saying yes, but probably I won't. I carried last year. I carried a 4x5 into tripod, not a speed graphic, tripod mount. I forget what kind of camera. A view camera.
Monorail.
Thank you very much. A monorail on a tripod, and I walked around with it. I didn't take any pictures, but I did get a lot of attention, and I knew I would. And that kind of attention is a very strong beginning point to being able to take pictures. It is. But usually I photograph. I am 87, and I remember when I was in my 70s, I was listening to an biography of August Sander, and they said, and he worked well into his 80s. I said, well, damn. I can do that easily. I'm going to work into my late 80s, and I am. But in truth, I'm shooting increasingly digitally because I just have so many, however many negatives I've printed, there are 7 or 8 times that have not yet been printed. I need to get to that stuff. I cannot conscionably add to my backlog of negatives, but I can go with it. I bought a new digital camera that I'm excited about. It's light, and I intend to use it a lot and to give it to experts like Michael LaFleur or Lee Oswald and Lee Oswald, Wormald, Lee Wormald. Sorry, Lee Wormald. Stage fright. I ascribe that to stage fright, and that's what I'll do. But I still feel the need to make photographs for no reason other than the need to make photographs. It becomes a way of being. If I go outside without a camera, I feel like I don't have my hat on or something. I need to have it. And there's an exhilaration to making photographs. Gilles Perez said, if you make a photograph, if you do what it takes to make a photograph, you become, it's a sort of a Zen approach. You become the subject, you become at one with the universe, and you make a photograph that embraces all of that. And the feeling is so exhilarating, you do not have to ever develop the film to realize that level of fulfillment. There might be something to that, but I would go a bit beyond that and say that I would like to see a friend make a digital print of it.
I think if you're Gilles Perez, you can afford to say something like that.
Right, but he's right. I mean, there is something affirming about releasing the shutter. It's like, you could equate it to like when you read something, you underline a sentence that caught your attention. I think that same kind of affirmation occurs when you release a shutter. It's like, yes, aha, yes. So, I got that, even if you didn't.
I was once at a talk. I was listening to Mary Ellen Mark give a talk, and she said something that sounded at the time a little bit too clever, which was that every jump in format makes the lesser formats or smaller formats easier. So she said,
you go up, yeah, I get it, right.
Or not, I mean, you can make better pictures. So she says, once you've worked with 4x5, you can make better pictures with 2¼ or 35 millimeter. Once you've worked with 8x10, you can make better pictures with 4x5. How do you respond to that?
I agree with it. There was a time that VES 40, which is the beginning photo course at Harvard, was taught with 4x5s because it was thought that the discipline it takes to use a 4x5, to put it on a tripod, to plant it on the ground, to move it around to get the frame just right, enforces attention on those matters that have to be done with such discipline and so studiously with a view camera, carry over to a 35, but you're aware of those things, but you can execute it more quickly. But you are aware of the importance of the edge of the frame, form, content, foreground, background, all those things that you can not think about if you just pick up a camera and go like that. But if you were weaned on equipment where it was a struggle to achieve those corrections, it carried over. Like you became part of your subconscious. You were able to execute it more quickly. I think it's true.
Thanks.
You asked the question. What's your answer? Do you think to it?
What's my answer?
I don't. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think there's some truth to it, but I haven't personally worked. I mean, I've worked with all formats, but I haven't seriously worked with all formats, so I can't reliably say that it worked for me.
Right.
But that brings me to something else, which is if you had no limits at this point except your accumulated wisdom and experience, and you could go out, you were physically like a 20-year-old or whatever, and you were concerned about something, recording something in the world today. Are there some, is there particular subject matter that you might go for? And again, nothing is limited here. You can go wherever you want. It's all paid for. And so ideally, and would you do it in a, would there be a different way that you might do it than the ways that you have photographed in the past? So subject matter and approach.
Well, I would go to Central Square. I've been trying to like master Central Square for longer than you have, and I can't quite get it right. I can't, you know, in fact, I can't be sure I haven't got that right because I have so much undeveloped film. But I find it. I don't know how to say this. I don't think where I am matters. I take great pleasure in getting in a photographic state, which is to say, to bring myself into a state where I'm completely present to the subject. And I find that very pleasurable. It's more, I suppose it's more rewarding. It's more welcome, more appreciated if the subject matter is more exotic than not, say, women in prisons versus pedestrians in Central Square. But yeah, I would go to Central Square. I'd like to nail it or master it. I don't have the desire. Maybe it is because I am in declining years. I don't have the ambition to travel to some distant part of the world where good photographs are to be found.
I guess I was talking more about concern that this needs to be documented more than good photographs.
Means need to be made.
Yeah.
Right. No, I don't think so. Perhaps I should. Photographs that address broad and specific, urgent questions
Let's say
about
something personal. For you.
Political. Pardon me, please.
Personal for you. Doesn't have to be, you know, Ukraine, or it doesn't have to be.
No. My personal to me, my ambition is perhaps my most frequent subject matter. Most of my negatives are of my family, and because no one was waiting for them, there was no deadline, there was no grant application, there was no commission. They went to the back burner, and I would like to spend my productive time printing some of those. I think they are. Not just at a personal level, but in more general artistic terms, there's some wonderful stuff there that's waiting to be processed. And it's unlikely, and you know, I cannot overstate my commitment to the darkroom and its processes, but I just don't have time for that. It's just it's a luxury. And I'm delighted that when I went into photography, I'm delighted about two things: that digital didn't exist. If digital existed, I think I might not have been a photographer, actually, because of my love and absorption in the material, the tactility of the analog process. So it was a big part of me. As I said before, and it was not until I was 30 that I realized that this was serious stuff. This wasn't just a hobby, but you could do profound things with a camera as well as with words or with clay, etc. That's how I felt about that. And where else was I going about this? So I lost track of what I was saying.
Well, I what you have said, I find fairly very interesting. And you know, we've spent probably about a half an hour on questions. So if there's nothing else from anyone else, last chance. Again, going once, going twice.
Oh, come on, somebody.
Yeah, let's shame someone. No, I think really that was great, Jack. And I'm looking forward to seeing you personally, and I'm also looking forward to seeing the work in its various iterations and presentations. That was really great. I wish that I had seen, if we had the time, that I could have seen more of the Inherit the Land body of work, which was in Tijuana, because that's, I think that's a real terrific group of pictures, and
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
very, there's a lot of emotion in it. It's almost operatic in some ways.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you as well, Jack.
Thank you.
It's been, I really enjoyed listening to this talk, and I appreciate you joining us this evening.
Oh, I appreciate the privilege and the invitation and all the rest of it. Thank you, indeed.
Thank you, Jack. It was wonderful hearing you talk about the work. It was like spending the evening with you, which I miss.
Thank you, thank you.
And we should talk about doing something when the book is published. And when you talk about your work, you bring an intimacy and an honesty to what we're seeing. That's without politics, without division, just human. And I think that that's one of the things that I love about your work and you.
Thank you
And
very
that
much.
said, I have to leave, but I enjoyed listening to you, and I'm so glad that it's recorded. Really.
Thank you very
Right.
much.
We'll see you soon, I hope.
I am honored, I am humbled. Thank you all.
And you too, Lee, tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Okay,
good
take
evening.
care. Thanks again, Jack.
Thank you, sir.